Good morning. I'm Reverend Victoria Ingram, and I'm welcoming you to this worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hamilton. Whatever the circumstances of your life, in the many ways that we identify as people, and in the diversity of how we love and live, I welcome you to this congregation and to this time together. In our community of faith, we are all included as we search for truth. We build community, and we strive to make the world a better place. Our congregation worships on the traditional lands of the Six Nations, and we remember our debt of gratitude for their stewardship of these lands and this place. We seek to be respectful in our relationship with all who live here with us, and we will work to preserve this place for future generations as it was saved for us. This morning, our call to worship is from a selection by Leif Seligman, which has been adapted from his writing, Each Breath. We pause in the flow of life to rest for a moment, to quiet ourselves so that we can feel what stirs within us. Each breath draws us closer to the pulse of life, and with each exhalation we make room for something new. May we find in our gathering the comfort of those who care. May we share patience and encouragement, compassion and inspiration, and may the rhythm of our breathing steady us and bring us ever back to a place of gratitude. I'm going to light our chalice this morning. A reminder of the warmth at the heart of our faith and the light and fire of conviction in our hearts. And I'm going to invite you to join me in saying our unison chalice lighting words. May this flame be our light of friendship and love. Starting our service this morning, you heard a rhythm improvisation from our presenter for today, Matt Meyer. He's a Massachusetts UU, lives near Boston, who's known for his love of music, his passion for rhythm and sound, and his message of love and justice. I've known Matt for many years, and I am very much looking forward to being a part of what he's sharing with us today. So please join me now in welcoming Matt as he leads us in our first hymn.
Well, it's so good to be with you all this morning, to worship together, to sing together, even though we might not be able to hear each other. I do invite you for our opening song this morning and all of the music today to please sing along. This is a great time to try out some new harmonies you might not have been bold enough to try if others could hear you. And so feel free to be still and sit quietly, to breathe deeply, or to get up and dance a bit, whatever moves you this morning. This song is called Blessed Motion. It was written by a woman named Annie Zylstra, who was inspired by the words of Martin Prechtel speaking about an earthquake that he had survived in Guatemala. He spoke of what it was like to watch the ground, the earth beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent, so reliable, so solid, suddenly in motion, suddenly moving unpredictably, sometimes violently. And so I know in the recent weeks and months it has felt like the earth beneath my feet is constantly shifting. Every day it seems like that which was permanent has shifted a little bit, has begun to move. And so I invite you into the spirit of this song, to think about what it looks like to be grounded in a time even when the ground beneath us is shifting. There's a low part and a high part. High part is call and response. Sing along with any part you like. Try out some new ones if you like. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean all moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean, all moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean, all moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground, till I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion. I'd love to continue on sharing a story with you all, a story for all ages. This is a story about a girl named Miriam who was just about to enter the 4th grade and was thrilled because she knew that at her school, 4th grade was the year that all the students got to learn an instrument and play in the school orchestra for the first time. And Miriam loved music, so she was thrilled. Did any of you ever play in the school band or orchestra? Can you do a little wave like this? Oh, great. We have some band nerds in the community here. I love it. So you know the excitement and the terror of walking into the orchestra room for the first time. On the first day, Miriam showed up extra early, and she looked around at all of the instruments, wondering which one she would get to play. There was an enormous bass drum, beautiful violins, shiny brass trumpets. She saw her teacher, Miss Berman, there, and she said, "Here I am. What instrument do you need me to play in the orchestra?" Miss Berman looked at her and said, Miriam, right? I think I've got just the instrument for you." And she disappeared into her office and came out a moment later with a tambourine. "A tambourine?" Miriam said. Well, is that even an instrument?" "Of course," said Ms. Berman. "Every great orchestra needs a great tambourine player, and you are our tambourine player." Well, Miriam took the tambourine, but for the whole rehearsal all day long, she ended up just having to play the same rhythm over and over. It went like this. It went dot, 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 dot. Can you all try clapping that? Dot, 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 dot. And when she came back to school the next day, it was the same rhythm for the entire rehearsal all day long. It went dot, 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 dot. And Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, the whole rest of the week, it was that same rhythm over and over and over. It went dot, 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 dot. Well, you might have guessed Miriam was not any more excited about this tambourine at the end of the week than she had been at the beginning of the week. So when she went to church that Sunday with her family, she was feeling pretty sad about it. This was, of course, before COVID times, and so she went with her family and she sat down early in her Sunday school class. Her teacher, Mahesh, noticed she was looking sad and asked her about it. She said, "Well, I was so excited to start the 4th grade and learn to play an instrument and play in the school orchestra, but I ended up playing the tambourine, and I just played the same rhythm all week long. It goes dot, 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 dot." "The tambourine," Mahesh said. He said, "Did you know that where my family is from in southern India, we call the tambourine a kanjira?" Can you all say kanjira? He said, "People spend their whole lives learning to master the kanjira. It's an incredibly complex and beautiful instrument. And one of the amazing things about the kanjira is that every sound you can play on the kanjira is a sound that you can also sing. And so people teach each other and practice by singing out the rhythms of the sounds of the kanjira. Takitatum, kutadengi, natuntum, tatum. People string together the rhythms of the kanjira and create, well, poetry out of its sounds. In fact, they write whole books out of the poetry of the kanjira. Where I come from, he said the tambourine is an instrument for creating poetry and, well, beauty in the world." "Poetry and beauty," Miriam said. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. Can you all say poetry and beauty? So Miriam was thinking about that after church at coffee hour. She sat by herself, and a family friend, Anna, came and sat with her. Anna remembered. She said, "This was the week you were going to learn to play an instrument and play in the school orchestra. How's it going?" "Well," she said, "I ended up playing the tambourine, and I just play the same rhythm all week long. It goes da 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 da." "The tambourine," Anna said. "Did you know that where my family is from, in Brazil, we call it a pandeiro? Can you say pandeiro?" She said, "People have been playing the pandeiro for generations in Brazil. In fact," she said, when my ancestors were brought to Brazil as enslaved people, they would play the pandeiro as a way to bring their community together, to get together with their neighbors and sing and dance and take care of each other even when times were so difficult. And in fact," she said, "they would even use the music of the pandeiro to secretly practice martial arts to protect themselves against the people that held them enslaved." She said, "Where I come from, the tambourine, it's an instrument for, well, for safety and for community." "Safety and community," Miriam said. "Can you all say safety and community?" Well, that doesn't sound so bad. So Miriam was thinking about all this when she went back to school the next day. She saw her teacher, Miss Berman, there, and she told her about the canjira and the pandeiro, about poetry and beauty and safety and community. But she said, "I don't know what any of that has to do with me. I'm still playing the same rhythm all week long that goes da 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 da." "Well," her teacher said, "Miriam, do you know where your name comes from?" "Well, of course," she said, "from my parents." "Well, right, but do you know who Miriam was?" she said. She said, "In your family's history, there's a story of the ancient Israelites fleeing slavery in Egypt and traveling to a land of freedom. And while they were on their way to that better place, they had a wonderful celebration to celebrate that they were on their way to freedom. And it was a woman named Miriam with her tambourine that got that celebration started, that invited people to dance and sing together in this holiest of moments, celebrating the journey they were on." She said Miriam was one of the first musicians in recorded history. And women like her would play the tambourine in ancient Israel and all over the Middle East to celebrate festivals and weddings and all kinds of celebrations. She said, "In your family's history, the tambourine was a way of celebrating the journey towards freedom and towards love." "Freedom and love," Miriam said. "Can you all say freedom and love?" Well, that sounds pretty good. So eventually, Miriam ended up playing some of the other instruments in the orchestra. She tried out the bass drum and a little bit of violin. She played a bit of trumpet. But she always remembered this story of the tambourine, how all around the world and all throughout history, people had taken the very simplest of instruments they had in their hands, the simplest tools that they had, and found ways to use them to shape their community, to create poetry and beauty, to foster safety and community, celebrate the journey we're all trying to make towards love and freedom. And I think that's a little bit of what we do here on Sunday mornings, is we come together in whatever ways we can, not just to remind each other of the values that are most important to us, but to think together and maybe even challenge each other to think about how we can use whatever tools we might have in our hands, even the simplest of instruments, to shape the world around us and create the kind of world that we want to live in together. So thank you all for helping me with this story.
Thank you for that story, Matt. Holding that message in our hearts and minds, let's take a short time now for breathing and contemplation, a time for a bit of meditation or prayer. Our reading for contemplation this morning is from Mickey Scott Bay Jones, and it's called Invitation to Brave Space. Following this reading, there'll be just a moment of silence, and then we'll be doing a little chanting with Matt. Together we can create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know, and we will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. Well, I don't know about you, but I start just about every day in the morning with a to-do list. Usually quickly scribbled on a post-it note on my desk. Between you and me, it is usually an overly ambitious to-do list. And near the top of that list most days is writing. But it's something that I struggle to actually make time for, despite being on the list. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about how hard it is, in fact, to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, the discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle, they will say. And they may be right. What you are doing may just be practice. But that's okay, because this is how you're going to get better. Some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who told me, for now, take 5 minutes and don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write. I sometimes feel like in all the years since I got that advice, I haven't written anything, but I have written a lot about what I would write if I did write. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. Being a musician has taught me something about practicing and learning how to do it. And I know from my own experience that the demons of perfectionism stand in the way of writing, just as they stand in the way of music, just as they stand in the way of creative risk-taking in general. Which is unfortunate because creating a life that doesn't yet exist for yourself requires some creative risk-taking. Certainly, being your best self in uncertain and anxious times such as these requires setting aside the discouraging voices that will hound us. And particularly, we know these days, creating a world of justice and equity and compassion, despite being surrounded by brokenness, by violence, by systemic racism, all of that work requires setting aside those voices that show up and tell you that your efforts are just piffle.
When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and for others. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago, is 4 semesters of ear training. Ear training is learning how to sing music just by reading the notes on the page, or how to write down the notes just by listening to a song. Now, when I began college, I knew that there certainly were people who were capable of this kind of magic, but it all seemed like some kind of impossible Harry Potter nonsense to me. Like, you may as well ask me to sit at my desk and make a feather float using my conductor's baton. I remember the very first day of ear training class, my very first class at college, there was a sort of nervous silence among us students. Silence, that is, except for one student who was quite loud in his nervousness. This louder student interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes of the first class to share that he was worried the class was going to be too advanced for him. He wanted to make it clear that he knew, in fact, not a single thing about ear training. The teacher kindly paused his introductions to respond, saying that we had all taken entrance exams and he was sure that we were all in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue, but was interrupted again. Well, the man responded, "Is this the very lowest class? Because I need to be in the very lowest class." Now you can tell our poor teacher looked around the room a little sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that yes, we were in fact a class of the very lowest students. Well, he said, it is ear training 101, so it is the lowest. There is, I guess, he said, a class for people that have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the most basic there is. Now, some of the other students giggled a little bit at this man's anxieties. I was kind of glad to hear, though, that someone was questioning the absurd notion that sight singing could even be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he actually never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was in fact too hard for him. I'm sure it wasn't. But I think because he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that if other folks had done this before, it must be possible somehow, and I made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered that student, though, who gave up before he had started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When discouraging voices hound me, when they show up to tell me that my efforts, whatever they are just piffle, I sometimes think of this student and I remind myself that maybe for now what I'm doing is just practice, because practice is how we're going to get better. These last months have been a time of uprisings calling for change, calling on those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to play a different role in our lives and in our communities, to learn a new tune, to practice some new skills. Particularly for white folks, this is a time to practice some new skills and learn some new roles to play. It's a time for studying up on the racist history of our society and the racist present of it. A time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well before. It's a time for practicing having some hard conversations that we certainly haven't practiced enough yet. Fellow white folks, if you see Black people making demands, I invite you to practice amplifying those demands by repeating them in calls to your representatives, to your colleagues, and to your family. If you've inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of segregation, which is true of most wealth most of the time, it's time to practice giving it away. If your muscle memory has been to call the police when something goes wrong, perhaps this is a time to practice something different, learning new skills for community connections and accountability, for taking care of each other in more deeply rooted ways. I know I won't all of a sudden do all of these things, but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. That slow and consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry and forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them the tunes. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. And so let us together practice the practicing. Practicing a world of justice and equity and compassion, practicing new ways of being together, practicing dismantling old systems of injustice and inequity and building up new worlds in the shell of the old. Practicing these things won't make the world perfect, but they make a better world possible. Someday I want to be an expert in justice and compassion when anxiety moves in the air like a storm. I want to be well practiced at creating brave space even when there is no such thing as safe space. These are daunting tasks, to be sure, and on most days, learning to transcribe a symphony seems more manageable. But that's okay, because for now, I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So, dear ones, please don't promise to be your best self today in this uncertain and anxious time. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice what you would do if you had committed to such things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to examine what we think we know, and so let us start together, and let us grow together, and let us practice together. May it be so. Let's continue on in song. This next one is a song that I originally learned was a traditional Irish folk tune. It turns out that it actually seems to come from a 70s R&B group called the Consolers. But I think you'll enjoy singing along. The words are, "Let the life I lead speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the life I lead speak for me."
I lead, speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the friends I have, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the friends I have speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the work I do, let the work I do speak for me. I do speak for me. Let the love I share, let the love I share speak for me. Let the love I share speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the love I share speak for me. Let the songs I sing, songs I sing speak for me. Let the songs I sing speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the songs I sing speak for me. Let the life I lead, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me.
As we draw toward the end of our service this morning, I want to extend our heartfelt appreciation to Matt for being with us this morning and sharing his music, his talent, his message, and his inspiration. So again, Matt, so glad you could be with us today. It's nice to see you again and to have you as a part of our worship. I have these words as we close this morning for benediction and moving out into the world with our message and doing more of the work that we do in the world to live a life and do work that speaks for us. This from Joseph Cleveland. May we hear the melody of life and find ourselves singing harmony. May we be open to the dissonances in the song of the land and its people, that we might be part of the world's urging toward justice, peace, and love. May we feel in our bones the rhythm of life and the land and find ourselves dancing. Following Matt's presenting our postlude this morning, we'll have some announcements, including our joys and sorrows, and then we will go into chat groups this morning. So let's listen to our postlude.